Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Funnel Trade. I've been having a conversation with a patron about the bull case for early Flesh and Blood, specifically Welcome to Wraith, Arcane Rising, and Crucible of War Unlimited boxes. So he asked me to make a video out of it, and I've thought about it for a couple days. I'm ready to put my thoughts down and answer it. So his question is, even my most optimistic calculations have the first block depleted in 2 to 3 years, not to mention everything that came after. I'm deeply invested in FAB, both as a collector, investor, and player, but my data and thinking are unable to make a tenable bull case for it. Okay, so that's the question, and I'm going to first prime your way of thinking about this, because I think you need to kind of have your method of thinking about this correct first, and then we can go into what my bull case is for this. So the first thing to think about is that bull and bear cases for an investment asset, anything, stocks, bonds, real estate, collectibles, whatever, it's all very relative. It's very subjective and it's very personal. And I'll give an example. Let's say that when Channel Fireball was screwing around with the supply of Monarch First Edition boxes, and were they actually at $1,000 for a little while? I don't recall. Let's just make up a number. Let's say $800 a box for Monarch First Edition, when they were sitting on a bunch of them and making the market think the boxes were much more rare than they really were. Let's say you went out and you bought 50 boxes at $800 each. And then, of course, we found out that the boxes weren't nearly so rare, and today they're $65. Now, if they're $65 today, and you're sitting on a lot of boxes that you bought for $800, you feel pretty bad about it. And you're probably thinking the bull case is pretty weak because your basis cost is $800 a box. Now, if you were buying in the last 18 months and you were getting them for $50, $55, $60 a box, maybe you were waiting for bonus buck sale, maybe you had good cash back points, all of those things together, and maybe your basis cost is $50, then you're looking out there today at Monarch First Edition at $65 a box. You're looking at the current supply in the market. You're looking at the total print run, and maybe you think the bull case is pretty strong. And of course, it's very subjective because you at $50 a box basis and that person at $800 a box basis have very different criteria for what good and bad mean. And so that's the first thing. It can be based on your basis costs. Other people will disagree in terms of how long is it going to take for a significant price movement to come along. And now they'll disagree on what significant means and on what time period is acceptable. And so some people will say, well, if Welcome to Wraith Unlimited boxes hit $100 in the next 6 months, then that would be a very, very bullish event, and that'd be very good. And some people would be willing to say, well, if it hits $100 in the next 2 years, then that's a bullish outcome. And so all of it is, there's this multivariate problem, and all of it is subjective. It's where will it go and how fast will it get there? And when it gets there, is that going to be good enough? So you have to be very specific when you're going to say that I'm bullish on this, or I think the case is bullish. Well, what exactly is your case? You have to define that explicitly. So I'm going to go take a look, and we're going to actually see what is the depth of the market. Now, I've done analysis of this very idea of market depth in the past. I think about 2.5 years ago, I did about a 6-month analysis that I made several videos about, and I believe the subject of it was Throne of Eldraine booster boxes. And what I was doing was trying to see how many boxes are in the market on a given day, what has the recent sales rate been, and what does that mean over the medium term for price action. And what I found after collecting available box numbers for every 2 or so weeks for several months is that it was a very weak correlation. And you have to keep that in mind. You have to understand that you need to adjust how much risk you're going to take based on this analysis. And you have to adjust that on the fact that it is a weak predictor. Now, It's a predictor, but it's a weak predictor. And what you will see when you do the analysis is that boxes are coming on and off of TCG Player all the time. So you have dealers out there who are sitting on tons of boxes and they're not listed, but they'd like to sell them. And maybe when the box price gets up to some certain point, then they feel compelled to go ahead and put a box in the market. And I'm no different. I have lots and lots of products in my closet that I intend to sell eventually, but they're not listed on TCG Player today at any price. You know, we talk about Lord of the Rings Special Edition being near $1,000. Maybe I'd be willing to part with a box at $1,000. Maybe at $1,500 I'd start selling them. But that doesn't mean that I have a single box listed at $1,500 today. And I think that's how a lot of sellers on TCG Player and other marketplaces operate, is that even though they're willing to sell the boxes at some price in the future, they haven't already put them up at that price. And that's where those other boxes come onto the sell side of the order book, and where an analysis of market depth becomes very squishy. So let's look at this. Recently, TCG Player started adding this information here. And if you change the horizontal axis, then it changes it to 6 month here, and it tells you how many sold in the last 6 months. And if you change it to a year, it tells you how many sold in the last year. I like 3 months because it's more granular, and 1 month is probably too granular and is too subject to short-term noise like bonus buck sales. So 3 month works for me. So what I look at here is total sold in the last 3 months is 50 boxes, and the current listed quantity is 98. And so if we just take that ratio very quickly, the ratio is 2, which means there are 2 3-month periods of boxes listed up there right now, which is 6 months. So there's 6 months of supply listed up on TCG Player. Now, does that mean that 6 months from today we will be out of boxes of Welcome to Wraith Unlimited on TCG Player? No, it absolutely doesn't mean that. More boxes will come on the market. And as we scroll down here to the bottom, you see these boxes get up here eventually to $215 for these final 4. And basically, at some point, a lot of other people sitting on boxes of these would see that the price is, let's say it's 160 if you include the shipping costs. They would see the price is 160 and they'd be willing to come in here and list boxes near that. So no, it won't get all the way up to $200, and it won't run out of boxes in the market in the next 2 months. But what we can say is maybe on a slightly longer period, it will start to be much shorter supply and the price will start to rise so that buyers and sellers can clear the market. And you're going to have to subjectively apply your own factor to that. Do you think that maybe in the next 12 months, the supply could get really tight? If we're showing 6 months of product on the market today, will the supply be really tight in the next 12 months? Will it take 18 months? Let's say you think a good factor to put on that is 3, and so you think in the next 18 months, the supply will be tightened up a lot, whatever you define a lot to be. So we have the subjective factor, we have the subjective definition of what a lot is, and maybe you think at that point the price will rise somewhere. Let's just take 150, because we'd be getting out there pretty far, pretty deep into the current supply, and maybe that would lure enough unlisted boxes onto the market. Would you say that $150 for a box of Welcome to Wraith Unlimited 18 months from now is a very bullish case for the product? Some people would, and some people wouldn't. Again, if your basis cost for Welcome to Wraith Unlimited is $55 because you've been buying in the last 2 years, then yeah, you'd probably say tripling that in the next 18 months is pretty bullish. I tend to think it'll do well in the next 18 months. I see 6 months of supply listed up here right now, and that's fine. It's not great, but it's certainly not bad. It means that the boxes will continue to sell and that the price will continue to slowly rise because these products are no longer being printed. It's the TCG expansion life cycle, and you can't defy it. So it's just a matter of whether you subjectively think that all these factors put together create a bullish scenario. And we'll move on to Arcane Rising. 34 boxes sold in the last 3 months, and there's 38 on the marketplace today. And so we might say that's 13 weeks. Let's call that 13 weeks. It's one more week than 3 months. Okay, 13 weeks. Well, and what is the highest listed box? 255. And right now they are 110. So, if it bridged half that price gap in the next 13 weeks and it went to, what would that be? 140, 150, 160, somewhere around there. If it went to 160 in the next 13 weeks, would you say that that's a bullish case? I would. I don't completely think it's going to go to 160 in the next 13 weeks. What you generally see in markets is very, very slow movement while a few people are quietly doing things. And then you see that most of the rest of the people suddenly realize things have been happening and they jump on the bandwagon, and you see a fast movement, a correction one way or the other. And so the fact that there are only about 13 weeks of boxes of Arcane Rising sitting up here right now, just that in and of itself feels bullish to me. It feels good for the long-term price appreciation of this, because my time horizon is years, 2, 3, 4 years. I don't know when I'll start selling all of my old Flesh and Blood boxes. But the fact that right now there's only 13 weeks of supply up here sounds very bullish to me. Crucible of War Unlimited, 19 boxes sold in the last 3 months, currently 27 boxes up here. So we'll say that's 4.5 months of supply-ish if you take that ratio between those two numbers. And again, 4.5 months of supply, and the top one is $190. So if we only get part of the way there from today's current $89 to $190, if it only gets to say 140 in the next 4.5 months, again, some of you will think that's very bullish, and some of you will think, well, that's not very good. Excuse me. And again, this all goes back to, what's your basis? What's your price memory of these products? Famously, for a long time when Monarch First Edition was crashing, Rudy just had an open offer that he would buy all cases of Monarch First Edition, sealed 4-box cases, for $400 each. And he's said in the past that he bought a lot of them. Obviously, that comes to $100 a box, and they're $65 a box today. There they are, $66. So maybe if you're Rudy, you're feeling bad right now, but you're not hurting for money, and so you're fine sitting on it, and you think the future of the product is bullish. If you have no skin in the Flesh and Blood investing game, and you're thinking, well, one day long ago, these were selling for $800 a box or $400 a box or whatever, then you're going to look at $65 today and think that's really bad. And this is where one of these kind of internet investing shit posting tactics comes into play. People will come along and they'll say, well, those boxes at one point, they were selling for $800. And they'll kind of, in their mind, they'll think that anything short of $800 is really bad. And they'll look at something like Rudy buying thousands of boxes for $100 each. And then one day, let's say they get back to $400 each. They'll say that's really bad. And they'll come along and they'll shit post about how dumb Rudy is because he has all these boxes that are only $400 each, not really understanding that he bought them for $100 each. And so you have to be careful when you're talking to people about stuff like this online. Some people just flat don't understand investment. They don't understand that every situation is different and subjective, that people have different risk tolerances, people have different basis prices, people have different time horizons, people have different objectives with holding or eventually selling an asset. And so not everyone's situation is comparable. And so when we talk about these things like bull cases and bear cases for an asset, we need to be very explicit about what we think. What do we think the time horizon is? Is a doubling of a product's price in 12 months good? In terms of the stock market, that's really good. That's phenomenal. That's suspiciously good in terms of the stock market. In the TCG investing world, doubling in 12 months is, well, it's good, but it's not unheard of. And, we see some things like Evolving Skies booster boxes that are up multi-hundred percentage points since they've released. The compound annual growth rates are over 100%. And so you have to have the correct frame of thinking, and you have to make sure that you understand your own and your audience's assumptions when you're having these kind of discussions. Real quick, we'll talk about Monarch First Edition, and I'll make the comparison here. So it's sold 42 boxes in the last 3 months, and there are 118 on the market. So that ratio is about 3, meaning there's about 9 months worth of product on the market. So given 9 months worth of product currently listed in the market, you should expect a lot more sitting on the sideline, ready to come into the market to be sold. And you should expect to not see a lot of dramatic price movements on Monarch First Edition in the next probably 18 or 24 months. It's probably going to take that long for the listed supply to dry up enough for it to have these ratios of under or about equal to 1 3 months period worth of supply sitting in the market. And the last thing to talk about, which I know there will probably be at least one person who would try to argue it, but it's the usage of TCG Player as a proxy for the entire market. And the reality is we don't have good market collection data in the TCG world. We don't have a Bloomberg terminal of the TCG investing world. And so we have to make models and use data that are available to us. And we have to do the best we can with those. And so I think TCG Player is a pretty good proxy. It's not perfect. It has its downsides, but it's the biggest marketplace that does the most volume in the biggest TCG market, that being North America. And so it's the best we're going to get. And they share a lot of information that other marketplaces either don't share or are much more difficult to tease out of what they do share. And so it's the best we're going to do in terms of finding data. And I don't think it's that bad. One thing you have to do in investing and in these kind of mathematical analyses in general is be sure you understand the level of uncertainty, or at least you're cognizant of the fact that there is uncertainty. And so if you're doing an analysis like this based only on TCG Player because that just happens to be the best data source with the most data available, you have to be careful about how much risk you take on, and that you understand that having imperfect data sources creates more risk. And so I come from a background of aircraft simulation in my engineering career, and there are a lot of times where we will do very, very crude analyses, very, very crude math models on things just to get a feel for what the outcome is. Is the outcome going to be good or bad? Is it going to be beyond some certain unacceptable line or not? And sometimes we do that because it's cheap and easy and the consequences are low. And when the consequences are high, we spend a lot more money to do much more detailed analysis with much higher fidelity models. And you have to take the same kind of approach when you're doing mathematical analyses for investing. Just understand that when there's less certainty, there's more assumptions, then there is more risk coming along with you taking action based on the results of those analyses. So I would say, to summarize here, I think the bull case for Flesh and Blood is still very positive. You see, especially when we're talking about those first 3 unlimited boxes specifically, the supplies of them are getting tight. And we should expect in the next 12 to 18 months for them to tighten up a lot and for the price to just naturally start moving up. And that doesn't even account for any other unpredictable events at this point. If Flesh and Blood announces some new format where people are enticed to start breaking open old boxes, or if something like, a person wants to start collecting all of the cold foils that they can, and they start putting a lot of buying pressure on early rainbow foils and cold foils and taking things like that out of the market, eventually even the unlimited boxes come in to backfill the supply that's being taken out of the market, and people will crack them to arbitrage those opportunities. There could be a situation where Legend Story Studios makes some kind of big announcement, they have some new initiative for encouraging play, and you just get a giant flood of new players into the game. And that puts a lot of pressure on old boxes too. It puts pressure on all the boxes. And so, even absent any type of unpredictable event like that, I think that the bull case for the early Flesh and Blood boxes is still firmly intact. And I don't think it's going to be 2 to 3 years to see any type of action or to see things moving up or anything like that. It's happening a little bit every day. And I think over the next 9, 12, 15, 18 months, we're going to see very, very good appreciation of the boxes. But for the most part, most people aren't paying attention to Flesh and Blood. That's why they've been able to sit at these low prices so long. Even things like Crucible of War, where there's only 13 weeks of supply left posted on TCG Player right now, and the boxes are only around $100. So let me know what you think, guys. And just keep in mind that, assessments of the future of an asset are always very, very personal. They're always very subjective based on your wealth, your risk tolerance, your age, your time horizon, whether or not you like the asset. And try and be realistic about your analyses, how much risk you're taking, and the unknowns involved in them. Thanks to everyone who makes this content possible, especially my very generous supporters on Patreon. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and join me on Final Trade.